We are in the third full day of the Canadian federal election campaign. Here's what's going on. If you're new here, I was in the Canadian Parliamentary Press Gallery for a few years, so I know a lot about politics and I'm covering this election for you. And today everyone was talking about taxes, and I think a lot of us realized how much we don't know. Because after a few days of really brutal headlines for Conservative leader Pierre, this was the headline that everyone was talking about today. CBC's Daniel LeBlanc reported that Carney co-chaired two investment funds worth $25 billion dedicated to the transition to a net zero carbon economy. But among other locations, these funds were actually registered in Bermuda, which is like a known tax haven. So on the face of it, not a great look, right? But what's tough here is that very few among us, including me, are experts on global asset management. And when Carney was asked about this, he actually had an explanation that did kind of make sense. Let me explain what I mean. First of all, Carney explained sort of the nature of the fund. It actually included a bunch of Canadian pension funds, like ones for teachers, retirees, municipal employees, etc. When asked about the benefit of parking these in Bermuda, though, he said, "It's an efficiency of a structure so that ensures that the flow through goes to the entities that are resident in the countries. It doesn't avoid tax because the taxes are paid in Canada." Translation? Basically, he explained that, quote, "the structure of these funds is designed to benefit the pension funds that invest in them." More translation? So instead of the investments being taxed while they're just kind of parked there and growing, they only are taxed when they're pulled out by the pensioners, which means that they're not being like double taxed. He's avoiding a form of double taxation with this Bermuda trick. Now, we can definitely debate the ethics of tax havens, period, and the use of them, but it sounds like this isn't really the cut and dry scandal that a lot of us, including myself, initially when we saw the headline, thought it was. All of this also, again, really overshadowed the announcements of the day. Carney announced a $2 billion fund for the auto industry, which was actually very prescient timing because this evening Trump just announced new auto tariffs. Poilievre, meanwhile, announced that he's going to keep the retirement age at 65 with respect to OAS, GIS, and the CPP, and he said that if seniors want to keep working, he's going to allow them to earn up to $34,000 tax-free. But obviously, in Poilievre's press conference, he also weighed in on the Brookfield stuff, the whole offshore tax haven story. He called the story, quote, "terrible hypocrisy." Poilievre was also asked about his own investments, and he said that he has, quote, "no investments in tax havens." He also said that after Trump's threats, he, quote, "decided to sell the very few investments I had abroad in foreign economies and put that money into Canadian shares and businesses." Poilievre also said that the Conservatives are going to be introducing measures in their platform to put an end to tax havens, and he said, quote, "if a mechanic or a worker here is paying his taxes, Mark Carney and billionaires should also pay their taxes here in Canada." This was actually something that Poilievre kept doing in his responses. He kept conflating the Brookfield investment fund that Carney previously oversaw with Carney's personal assets, which implied that Carney was hiding money in an offshore tax account, like his own money, which is not true. There's no evidence for that whatsoever. Carney actually confirmed about his assets today that all he has is cash and personal real estate. And when it comes to things like equity stakes, stock options, any investments, yada yada, he confirmed that, quote, "all those assets were divested into a blind trust." Poilievre has been implying that Carney knows what's in there. That's actually not true. Because the way the blind trust works is that while Carney might have known exactly what his holdings were when they went into that trust, the second they're in there, someone else has control over them and he has no idea what happens to them. So that individual could have sold a ton of stuff, bought entirely new stuff. Carney doesn't know what he is invested in anymore. That's how it works. And the ethics commissioner is also going to look at this stuff to determine whether there need to be any shields put up. So we can keep an eye on all of this, but I do honestly feel like a lot of it is kind of a non-story right now, but if it turns into a story, I will fill you in. The two other sort of big headlines today were ones that Carney was pressed about because they had to do with him and his flubs or his party. First of all, he's gotten a little bit of backlash over his decision not to participate in the TVA debate. This is an extra debate. It's not one of the two official debates in the election campaign. Parties were being asked to pay $75,000 each, which Poilievre offered to pay for Carney, but to be clear, that's like a very exceptional thing. Parties don't normally have to pay that kind of money to participate in a debate. That's like not a normal thing. And I talked to my friend Gab about this and asked her hey, do people care that Carney doesn't want to do this debate? Is this something that is upsetting Quebecers? And she was like, no, it's more of a thing that politicians care about. So it seems like that's not quite the huge scandal that some Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet are making it out to be. However, this This one, a little bit more of a sore spot. Carney confused the massacre that took place at Polytechnique for a shooting that took place at Concordia, and when announcing his candidate, who is a survivor of this massacre, he pronounced her name wrong. Polytechnique is a really big deal, not just in Quebec, but in Canada more broadly, because it was a really targeted, violent act against women. In response to this, Carney said today that he enormously regrets the mistake, that he just misspoke, and he feels really bad about it. The other big headline was about Liberal MP Chandra Arya being barred from running under the Liberal banner because of his alleged ties to India. So it was a potential interference kind of situation. That's why he wasn't greenlit. In response to this story, Carney said, quote, "We have a very robust and serious process of vetting candidates and we take it very seriously. So there are some candidates that we don't, to use our terminology, green light, we don't approve, and that is the case with Mr. Arya." And then he took a little swing at Poilievre, saying, quote, "One of the things about having security clearance is you don't then take the information that you have from security clearance and repeat it to others. This is something Mr. Poilievre wouldn't know because he doesn't have his security clearance." Speaking of security clearance, obviously the story that dominated yesterday, you guys probably remember, was about Poilievre and the fact that he didn't have a security clearance, which meant that he wasn't told that India actually did, apparently, according to CISA sources who spoke to the Globe and Mail, meddle in the Conservative leadership race that Poilievre won. So obviously not a great story for Poilievre, especially because it is a clear problem associated with his refusal to get security clearance, right? So he tried to deflect from this by lobbing some really tenuous allegations at Mark Carney. He claimed that Carney was beholden to China because Brookfield, while Carney was chair, obtained a loan from the Bank of China. Poilievre's accusations here, Carney said that Poilievre, quote, "doesn't understand the world." Quote, "Mr. Poilievre is a lifelong politician. That's all he's ever done. He's slogans, soundbites, slander. He doesn't understand how the world works." And then he called Poilievre a, quote, "conspiracy theorist." Here's the clip.
Il invente toutes les choses, il est un homme de... He's a conspiracy theorist. Spends too much time with his MAGA friends and he comes up with whatever he can think of.
So yeah, things are getting a little spicy on the campaign trail. What do you think about this?